Hello, everyone. Welcome to Montessori 101, a live show from Child of the Redwoods, all about the magic of Montessori. We believe that every child deserves a Montessori education. I'm Aubrey Huggis.
I'm David Hargis. Now, whether you're watching us live or watching a replay or listening to the podcast version, we're just so happy you're joining us. And if you want to learn more about our work, head over to our website, childoftheredwoods.com.
All right. So today we are doing our next installment of the 21 essentials from our 21 most essential list that we have on Child of the Redwoods.
The 21. That's right.
This is just one of the 21. It is the scrubber, which is so surprising. It's a really cool one. It's going to be very unique as a Montessori material. We're actually going to look at it, and we are talking about just a scrubber. And it is one of the Montessori essentials, and we'll tell you all about it. But if you want to check out the full list of the 21 Montessori essentials, you can find that on our website at childoftheredwoods.com/essentials.
That's right.
Yep.
So, what are we talking about? Well, we are actually talking about scrubbers, a real deal scrubber. You probably have one in your kitchen, maybe in your bathroom, in a closet somewhere. Maybe you have them all over your house. Who knows? Basically, it's any kind of material or any kind of gadget that scrubs. And it would be sized to fit your child's hand in this case. Mm-hmm. So it could be one of those green scrubby sponges, where that have kind of the scrubby part on the top and the spongy part on the bottom. It could be even a rough cloth. We recently bought some cloths that we're using instead of sponges that are sponge-like, but they have a lot of grip. That would work. It could be a little brush. Sometimes people like to have their child pick out a special little brush with or without a handle that's theirs or is part of their kit.
Yeah.
It is, in other words, a scrubber, some kind of scrubbing thing. Because actually what we're talking about isn't the scrubber, it's the scrubbing, right? The scrubber is just the tool that we're going to use to do the action, but it's actually the scrubbing itself that is what's important. So on our list of 21 essentials, we've picked a couple for each of the 10 different subject areas that we've identified in the Montessori curriculum. And we put the scrubber under practical life because, scrubbing, cleaning, and so forth, take care of self, care of environment. These are all part of the practical life curriculum. So you're going to see a lot of the lessons that are related to scrubbing in the 5 and under set, in what we would call the primary years. But I want to emphasize that in Montessori, we are interdisciplinary. That means we don't focus on one single academic area at a time. So if I say that the scrubber is part of the practical life curriculum, I don't mean it's only part of that. Obviously, you're also going to be doing sensorial things, right? The feel of the scrubber and so forth, plus whatever activity that you're scrubbing. So if you're doing an artwork and maybe you're cleaning up art, that could be art. Or if you're using a scrubby sponge as a brush to paint with, that's also using a scrubber and it's also part of the arts. Or maybe you've you went out and you found a cool rock or an old a bone in the forest or an antler. I remember finding antlers and things with the boys, and then coming home and letting them clean it with a scrubber. So that's practical life plus sensorial, plus in that case, it would be life science if you're scrubbing like an antler, or a rock would be physical science. So it's interdisciplinary. It covers all of those things.
Right.
And for my money, somehow, I don't know why, but the scrubber feels so quintessentially Montessori, even more than the pink tower. There's just something about the scrubber. I think it's because it's so simple. Like you would not normally think of the scrubber as an essential material. You would think books or pencils or a calculator or a pink tower or something, right? There's all these sorts of things. But in Montessori, the scrubber, the humble scrubber, is one of those really, really, really important ones. Is it's very simple, it's very practical, and it's focused entirely or almost entirely on the method and the concepts, not the material itself.
You mentioned that the scrubber is quintessentially Montessori.
In my mind, it is, for sure.
I agree with you. And I'd like to also point out that if you're comparing the pink tower to the scrubber, the pink tower might be used by a child several times,
Sure.
right? Maybe even many times, but probably not as often as a scrubber would be used by a child. So when you
For
go
the course
into
of the person's life, for sure.
and even in a Montessori classroom,
Yeah,
if you're
that's
just
right.
thinking about a 3-year period. So if you go into a Montessori classroom and you were to look around, you might see a lot of children scrubbing at the same time, but you might only see one child doing the pink tower at a time.
That's right.
Right.
I like to highlight it though, because I think we often underestimate. It's a classic problem we have, when homeschoolers face it, traditional schools face it, this idea of that there's some kind of a quality or quantity, or this is related to the seriousness. We had a discussion last night with our teenage sons. He's in a coding program, and we were talking with one of the teachers, because we're not really capable of teaching him coding, so it's one of those things that he takes outside the home as part of his homeschooling career. And we talked about rigor, and they said, well, they have lots, we try not to give too much homework. And we were like, no, that's not what rigor means, right? Rigor doesn't mean you have 10 hours of homework to do every 2 nights or something. Rigor is about the amount of thinking that really is required. And so I think because of that, we often underestimate what those like simple things like a sponge means, because we're like, well, how could a sponge be rigorous? Well, a sponge is super rigorous because it goes right to the heart of all of these Montessori concepts, which we're going to talk about. And so, yes, it is different than a pink tower, but I want to encourage our audience to think that something can have value educationally, even if it is super mundane and simple, because the material itself isn't the magical part. So I've given you a little bit of taste about what I think is cool about a scrubber. What do you think about? Do you like scrubbers?
Well, I really like scrubbers because they make a lot of bubbles if you use dish soap.
Yes.
And I think that sensory aspect is really appealing to children.
And adults.
And adults too.
I mean, how many times do you buy flavored or scented soap, like dish soap and things?
Yeah, or how many times do you walk just down the street and see somebody blowing bubbles, or it's common at a festival you might go, they might be blowing bubbles around. It's just very magical, right?
That's right.
So you're looking at those bubbles and they're swirling with rainbow colors, and there's just something very inviting about wanting to interact with them.
That's right.
So we have a lot of like this, it's kind of a classic child activity, right? Blowing bubbles.
Mm-hmm.
And part of it is because Maria would say, like, there's so much about the senses that is drawing the child, the shape of the bubbles, they're tend to be spherical, right? When
they
they're
almost fly and float, but not quite.
Right. And they stick together, especially if you scrub a whole bunch of them, if you really lather it up. They they glom onto each other, and some of them can get quite big even if you're scrubbing with them, and I think that's really interesting too. So there is a big sensorial aspect to it. You're experiencing it with your eyes, you're looking at the beauty of the bubbles, and you're also experiencing it with your body, physically moving the scrubber around. There's energy in it, and that is also enticing to the child, because anything that involves movement is going to be very child friendly. And anything that it does not involve movement, where the child is like supposed to sit there and engage passively, it's not child friendly, really.
Also true for adults.
Yes, also true for adults.
That's right.
But we kind of have some stamina, right?
Yeah, we do. We've
we can push
learned to make ourselves sit and listen.
Make ourselves sit down and be still.
To be polite.
But children don't really have
They're learning
that experience.
They're learning it,
so anything really incorporating movement is going to be very Montessori friendly in general. But I really like the scrubber in particular because it calls to mind a calm meditative space. So I actually really enjoy, I don't enjoy it all the time, but there are periods where I really enjoy doing the dishes by hand. I don't enjoy it when our dishwasher is broken and I have to do the dishes by hand and they've all piled up because the dishwasher is broken. But I really enjoy it if I choose to wash some dishes and I'm just in there and it's warm and there's soapy water and I'm really scrubbing off something, or I've got the cast iron skillet and I'm scrubbing off. Like there's something good that feels feels good about the action. And I think it's the repetitiveness of it.
Well, there's some research about this, right?
There is, yeah. Meditation and meditative actions, like breathing deeply or, anything, running, anything that really calms the body down, anything that really calms your nervous system down is going to be kind of the same. You're going to find the same meditative space as you do. And I think as children do when they're using a scrubber to meditatively, repetitively scrub something.
And to be real clear, this isn't just some San Francisco woo-woo stuff. No, this is actually like, it may be, but it's also actually backed by science. We actually know from research that meditation has an actual effect, prayer, meditation, and cleaning.
Yes. So when, most of us tend to think of cleaning as just something that just has to be done.
Right.
But when you really slow it down to the movements, you realize they're very repetitive, and it really can feel good to clean something. I think a lot of people experience it, but in our society, in our culture, we're just so rushed all the time to try to get to the next thing that we don't really take the time to appreciate the slowness, the repetitive nature, the meditativeness of cleaning something.
That's right.
So there is some really cool evidence, some research that we found. And I'll just read this as a quote. It said this article, this actual research from NCBI,
it's from the NIH.
The NIH, right? Yeah.
It's republished by the NIH.
All right. Anyway, so it says cleaning also results in an increase of the parasympathetic tone, which is the relaxed signals from the brain, and a decrease of the sympathetic tone, which are those fight or flight signals from the brain. And it is similar to what happens with meditation. Thus, cleaning and meditation both have been found to be equally effective. What? In terms of modulating autonomic tone. So,
in other words, in calming it down.
Yes. So the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system are both part of the autonomic nervous system, which really just controls how your body is, handling the stimuli that, it's reacting to. And that includes stress. It could be something that is affecting your nervous system. Other things that affect your nervous system that we can think of off the hand could be like sleep or lack of sleep.
Yeah.
Definitely affect your nervous system. You might notice that when you sleep more or in a healthy way, you wake up and you feel rested and calm. And that's because your nervous system is feeling calm. That's the parasympathetic nervous system. And when you don't get enough sleep and you wake up and you're feeling, how it feels to feel
cloudy,
frazzled,
foggy, whatever.
Foggy or jittery, those kind of feelings. That is your sympathetic nervous system amping up and becoming activated.
Because it's like a real lizard brain thing. It's a fight or flight.
It's real.
So for those of you who have older kids, lower L, and you're starting to study humankind in a anatomy in a deeper way, this would also be one of those things that you could help them start to draw a connection to. Like, why do humans feel fight or flight, and what can we do to overcome that? And, the lessons that you've given to the younger or when they were younger about scrubbing, and you can start to connect those dots because it's actually just baked into how we as animals operate.
Yeah, and you can see it on the children's faces. In fact, it is kind of a truism in Montessori that if the children seem disordered and unsettled, then if you go and look in your practical life area and you draw them into some kind of practical life, scrubbing is a great one to draw them into. Then that actually helps calm them. So it can actually be used as a discipline technique as well.
That's
and I think it's something that a lot of people don't think about.
Yep, that's right.
So, I'll tell you, it's included in toddler discipline for every age and stage.
Yeah, one of your books
that I wrote in our
right.
discipline, our community, the positive discipline community. There's a lot of talk about how we can calm our children by, hugging them or giving calm
physical confinement of some type to give them a sense of security, maybe.
And those also, the way we interact with our children with respect, those also calm, the parasympathetic nervous system is also calmed in those ways.
That's right.
But I think that often is neglected the power of scrubbing,
yes,
which can be used as a discipline technique for young children.
And a technique that they can incorporate into their life ongoing, because we as adults, it's not like life gets less stressful. In fact, it just tends to get more stressful. And the more of these habits we can build as kids, we can call back to, the healthier we're going to be.
Exactly. It becomes a tool. Yeah. So I think it's a beautiful, beautiful work, both for the strengthening of the hands, that fine motor skill development and gross motor skill development that also can come in if you're scrubbing something really, really big. But I think that probably for me, the biggest benefit would be the calming of the nervous system.
So how did Maria figure this out? I mean, she had so many innovations, and you just said yourself, we don't, even today, many, many, many years after her original work, we still seem to underappreciate this. How exactly did it come about, and why is it in the Montessori curriculum anyway?
Well, if you can imagine in your mind a little girl who loved to scrub floors, this is how the story goes. And I know it seems like a fantasy that some parent concocted.
That's right.
Because that's all our dream, like children who love to clean.
That's right.
But I actually know someone who knows someone who knows someone who told me that it's 100% true, so you can believe it. This little girl loved scrubbing so much that she wanted to do it more than anything during certain periods of her life, especially when she was skipping school. And so school she found very, very boring. You had to sit in a desk and copy words and give the right answer to the teacher and be calm all the time and be really still with your body. And this little girl hated that. So what did she do? She would say, "Mom, I don't feel good. I don't think I can go to school today." And her mom would say, "Oh no, is it, what's going on?" She would say, "A headache?" And her mom would say, "Well, I guess you can stay home." And so little Maria would stay home from school, and she would just continue on. Eventually, she wasn't really sick, so one wouldn't imagine that she couldn't actually stay in bed all day and just stare at the ceiling. I'm sure she got up and did things, or just felt well enough to participate in the household goings on. And one of those things was scrubbing, and she actually really loved it. She loved scrubbing floors. And I think that this is probably one of the reasons why she incorporated it into her.
Wait, you're telling me that little girl was Maria Montessori?
Har. So
but she continued to love that activity.
She continued to love it. Yeah.
Even in older age.
She continued. Practical life was one of her favorites. And actually, there's another story about Maria that comes from someone who actually knew Maria Montessori. And it's another one of those old Montessorian tales that just is passed on from Montessorian to Montessorian. But that tale goes that one of her granddaughters actually reported that Maria actually wasn't very good at cleaning. Sometimes she would forget, they would have family dinners, and Maria was always happy to help out with the potato scrubbing, to get off the dirt and to the potato peeling. But then she would just leave the peels in the sink and walk off. And as Montessorians, we think those kind of stories are really funny because there's so much cleaning in the classroom. There's this huge emphasis on teaching children how to pick up their toys and keep up after herself. But actually, I think that her interest wasn't in that things should be clean. It's in the good feels that you get when you do clean something, and what it does for your body and what it does for your spirit.
That's right.
Right. So she incorporated that in a very practical way right into her early classrooms. Her children, the children who worked with her, they really didn't know a lot about how to clean up their messes anyway. She was one of the first people to really try to teach them those practical, useful skills. And so she was just thinking, what are all the things that adults know how to do that we could teach little children how to do? And she realized that she could take those messes and break them up into little small steps and help children learn each of those little steps. And so she gave them each as very specific little lessons.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so fun. So tell me about, I know that you had Thursday cleaning night because you talked about it at home.
Yes.
But do you want to talk about did you like cleaning as a child? Did you
because when we were preparing for this, you asked what, because we were saying why do people seem to think that children hate to clean. And you asked, well, how did you feel about it? And I thought, oh, I didn't like it. But then I thought more about it. I was like, well, yeah, actually, we had a ritual in my home when I was growing up where it was family cleaning night, and it was on Thursdays, and it was after Dad got home from work, and we got home from school, and it was in the evening, and we just would go room to room and break up the task and vacuum and clean the kitchen, and we'd turn on the TV, and we'd kind of be watching TV while we're cleaning. It became like a family event, and we'd have some kind of a fun food for dinner, something simple like corn dogs or hot dogs or something that would be easy to cook because you're busy cleaning. And as I was thinking back, trying to remember this, I realized this is actually a beloved memory. Actually, I really, really cherish those family cleaning nights, like spending that time in the house. It really, if I think about it right now, it really takes me right back. And I don't think it's just because we did it so repeatedly. I think it's because we were together. We were taking care of our home. There's a warmth to it. There's just something in there. It's about family and community and getting together. And, again, you might think like, well, how boring, or how like no one likes to clean. And I suppose the task of cleaning itself is less desirable than, say, play video games or something like that, potentially. But I think it's one of those things where sometimes the easy material thing is so tempting and yet so empty. And when we actually sort of push ourselves to align to something deeper, more familiar, spiritual, or something like that, that's when we actually feel the true warmth. It was an interesting.
Maria Montessori would agree with you.
That's
she
right.
believed very strongly in the power of the community and in creating a community for the children where they felt like they had peers who were participating and they were doing things for other people. So one of the great emphases in Montessori, cannot speak today, is that when you are teaching your children how to clean up their work and put it away, they're not just putting it away because that's where it goes. They're putting it away for the next person.
That's right.
Right. So it's an act of service. So
that's right.
Instead of just like a cleanup, you got to clean up your toys because, it's a mess, right?
That's right.
Or you made a mess, now you got to clean it up, right? That's kind of an accusatory way of thinking about, I have to take care of this.
That's right.
But no, it's more like an act of service. Like I am cleaning so that we all can have this beautiful clean space. I am cleaning this up so that we don't have to walk in these milk drips that had spilled, or I'm cleaning because a clean table is beautiful for the family, and then we'll all have our lunch on it.
Yeah, it's an example. I think we know Maria the scientist, but I think it's a great example of Maria the spiritualist, who had in equal measure a real belief about shared responsibility and where joy can come from. So why do we use scrubbing brushes? Because we continue to use them today. They're just practical tools. And the reason that we put them on that essential list is that you find them in so many places. So going back to this very beginning, the anecdote of Maria as a little girl enjoying it. And from her biographers, apparently she enjoyed cleaning till, the day she passed on. Like this was just part of what gave her comfort or pleasure or something, right? Yeah. She found something in that. And so as Montessorians, we want to continue that tradition, not the least of which because, as you just said, we're cleaning up after ourselves, washing dishes, cleaning tables, wiping a mirror. These are daily tasks, but they're also things that are important for the community, and they're a gift of service to others. And care of self, care of environment is integral, not just to the practical life where you'll find those specifically, but to the entirety of a Montessori approach. Plus, we have all kinds of really fun works to go with scrubbers, like cleaning shoes. I remember when Constellation, we had a boot polishing very early when we had first started the program, cleaning a work tray. And my favorite was always scrubbing pumpkins. If you haven't scrubbed a pumpkin, you're really missing out. Our little ones really love that. And actually, adults love it too. The first time I realized that scrubbing pumpkins was a legitimate work, I was in my 20s, and I came to Montessori later. And you had bought a pumpkin, and we had it at home, and our oldest, who was very, very little at the time, was scrubbing. I was like, what is going on here? And then you took them to school. At that time, you were still teaching. I
Mm-hmm.
remember when you were teaching in public school, you would take pumpkins and have them scrub.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just really curious. And then I realized like this is actually a really great idea. It's the
Mm-hmm.
tactile feel and the scrubbing of it. So what kinds of things do you remember scrubbing
With
as a kid?
me personally?
Yeah, or with our boys. I mean, I remember
Um,
us having scrubbers out all the time. Besides the pumpkin. I remember the pumpkin.
well,
It's a real memory worm.
growing up in a Montessori environment, I did all the scrubbing. Like, I remember that as an older child, I remember how fun it was that my mother would bring all kinds of things to scrub, to her Montessori school. And I was older, so I have those memories. I don't remember scrubbing so much as a tiny child, but we scrubbed all kinds of things at Montessori school. When I was older, I would go and I would do the scrubbing because it was so fun too.
Well, your mother's still a professional scrubber.
Yes, she is. I know. For sure. But the big one that I remember that was really interesting every year was tire scrubbing.
Oh,
So the school would
yeah.
have someone donate an old tire that was very muddy and just like gross old tire. And then the children would go out in the yard and just scrub that thing. And it was like this very big, intense scrubbing, that involved the whole body, right? And sometimes a friend too, or several friends, depending on if it was a tractor tire or a smaller tire. But I remember that being really, really fun.
Yeah.
So obviously at our house, we didn't have like a tire to scrub, although I guess our kids could go wash our car. Generally don't want your preschoolers doing that. So what I tried to do is I tried to give them big scrubbing experiences just in our home. So we did a lot of wall scrubbing, a lot of chalkboard scrubbing, shelf scrubbing, counter scrubbing. If we, I'm thinking, so there was a lot of that big scrubbing. We also did bathtub scrubbing.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes we'd go in there and just like, before we took a bath, we'd be like, we should clean our bathtub. So instead of getting out the Comet or Barkeeper's Friend or whatever gritty type of thing you use, we would just do it with soap.
Yeah.
And it was so fun.
Because it gets real slippery.
Because it's real slippery. Yeah. And so sometimes they would get in the bathtub and they would be scrubbing it while inside it and then kind of be slipping around. And it's just fun for them. So a lot of that kind of stuff. And then little scrubbing is also good too, which you can do with a little toothbrush that you're not going to use for your teeth anymore. So it's going to be labeled or marked somehow. Sometimes I would wrap special tape around it, right? And use a Sharpie only for cleaning. Or just those kind of little teeny tiny brushes. And then they can scrub teeny tiny things, like old grandma's jewelry. Like if you have any jewelry or
polish, jewelry polishing is a classic.
Yes. Yeah. So you could scrub, or usually not expensive jewelry, but like that costume jewelry is really good. You can get the gems that are really made of glass and they're just all very colorful. I can find them in old antique stores and stuff like that for not too expensive. Yeah. So that's a really fun one to do, is like little scrubbing like that. You can scrub rocks, like David said. We always scrub shells. And just as far as what kind of scrubber, I would go to all the dollar stores and thrift stores, and we would just, like, when we saw a little scrubber, we would just pick it up, and we tried to acquire a little variety of scrubbing tools so that I could just keep them in the cabinet and I could get out the one that would.
I think the important thing is the size, right? Not so big that the child can't easily use it. So
well, sometimes those big scrubbers are fun too because you use them with two hands.
That's right.
Yeah, but you definitely want to make sure that you test before picking out.
I just remember cutting the sponges into quarters or half.
For sure,
to match the little one.
For sponges, and if you're using the scrub side of the sponge, you could cut them.
So how do you give a lesson on scrubbing?
So at its most basic for toddlers, all I would really do is I would I would set it up. If you have like a 2-year-old or something, this is when I had 18-monthers to age 2.5 to 3 in a classroom. I would just get a bowl and I would refill. I would refresh it every single morning. And I would go ahead and put a drop of dish soap inside and then a little tiny bit of water, not so much that one would tip over the bowl and make a big mess, just a little tiny bit, enough that there'd be enough to wet the
It's some kind of a
scrubber.
scrubbing
And
sudsing thing, right?
well, dish soap and water in a bowl.
But enough, just enough soap so that it would make a bit of a sud.
Just enough water so
Uh-huh.
that it could create some bubbles. Yeah. And just wet the scrubber.
Yeah.
And I'd put that on a tray, and next to it, just one of the little scrubbers, probably one of the little round ones that you often see for scrubbing, vegetables or whatever, just a little vegetable scrubber. And so that kind of it, that and a drying cloth was all that I had for the youngest. So it was like scrubber, bowl with a little bit of soapy water, and a little drying cloth, and it would all be already set on the tray, ready for the child to work with. Because our little toddlers, we just really want to give them like a 1-step or a 2-step lesson. We don't want to give them a full long scrubbing lesson. And so we just set it up very, very simply for them. And then the lesson would be to take the scrubber, swish it into the water, kind of dip it in there, and then go to a surface like a table, like a toddler table or whatever surface they were going to scrub, and then to just like scrub the surface, then to take the scrubber back, put it back on the tray, just not rinsing it even or anything, getting the drying cloth and wiping it down. And that was like enough of a lesson for a toddler. But for an older child, a child who is getting more experienced in different kinds of scrubbing methods, we have, I'll actually give them the lesson that we have in our primary curriculum. So this is for table scrubbing, and this is the full lesson. There are 13 steps to it. So your scrubbing lessons should start super simple, and then as your child acquires skills and gets better at it, you add more steps to it. And so the full table scrubbing lesson, that is the primary way for a child who is a little more advanced than a toddler. So you would set out the materials on a bath mat or a rug, like a little rug, or I used bath towels here at the house because it's about the right size. And then you have a pitcher on the bath towel. You have a big bowl, like a basin, and then you have your drying cloth over here, and you also have a little bucket too. And that's for dirty water. And so you've also got your soap. And so all of your materials are set out here. So then you fill your pitcher up, and you have the child do this. So they would take the pitcher to the sink, fill it up halfway, and they're either practiced to know how to fill the pitcher halfway, or you have a little fill line there, like a little piece of tape or something. They fill it up halfway, they carry it carefully back to the towel, and then they pour the water into the bowl, a large bowl, and then they take that drying cloth and they dry out the pitcher because the pitcher has been used. Okay. So then they're going to set the pitcher aside, and then they take their scrubbing brush and they wet it in the water and kind of shake it to release the extra water. And then they can pick up some soap. Like I like to use a bar of bath soap, and then they can just kind of slide it onto the bristles so that they get a little bit of soap on them. And then they're ready to actually scrub. So they can take that scrubber over and they can scrub the table anywhere they want, all over. We encourage them to get every part of the table possible. So they're scrubbing the legs of the table or the sides of the table and the top and underneath and, you know, all around it. And this can actually take quite some time. So they might run out of bubbles in water. They might have to come back to the bowl and get a little more soapy water. Usually we teach them to kind of use a circular motion in order to cover a wide area. So they're really getting into the rhythm of it, the repetition of it. And they just come back in and they just like keep getting more water and soap and rinsing until they have scrubbed the entire table. And sometimes this can take a long time, you know, and little children often love this part because, you know, the more they scrub, the more bubbles you get, right? Especially if you're scrubbing in a circle. And if you're working a table systematically too, you're like going from left and scrubbing to the right. You're working the table and you can see the part that you have covered and the part that you haven't covered. And so there's like that procedure to it. And then you come back and you rinse off the scrub brush in the bowl of water. And then you can go back over the table table with a sponge. So then you would get your sponge and squeeze it out with the water, and then you would wipe your whole table down so that there's no more suds on it. Such a big procedure, right? And you're doing that. This time you're teaching the children how to take that sponge, and you're wiping from left to right, left to right, left to right, which is another thing in Montessori that is something that we do is the left to right procedure. It helps prepare the mind for writing.
That's right.
And reading. So, and after the table is all wiped down, then you come back to the bath mat. So now you've got a table that's nicely clean, nice and wet. And you can continue doing this. So at this point, if you have a whole bunch, if your table is really dirty and you have a whole bunch of dirty water, what are we going to do? Well, we need to take that bowl and empty it into the bucket, get rid of that dirty water, and then we can repeat the process with the pitcher again. We can go get fresh water, come back, refill the basin with the fresh, clean water, and then take our sponge back to the table and wipe it down again. We can just keep doing this until the table is sparkling clean, right?
That's what makes this not just that's what elevates this lesson, right?
Yes.
It's that it's not just go clean the table. It's you're teaching these procedural steps, including the left to right action.
Yes.
Because it has meaning, right? You're using something simple like a scrubber in a pitcher, but you're actually conveying a lot of complex ideas.
Yes. So after, say, you've got a nice wet table there,
Yep.
now you're thinking, okay, it's nice and clean. It could air dry if you wanted to air dry. But what if somebody wants to sit there? So to be in service to the next person who wants to come and use that table, you would go back, get your drawing cloth, go back to the table and wipe it down, using the same left to right motions with your hands till the table is beautiful and dry and pretty. Take your drawing cloth back. And, if you wanted to polish it at that point, you could, add that to the table scrubbing supplies, or you don't have to. It can just be nice and clean. And then you have to take care of what's left, right? So you take your dirty water out of that basin, dump it into the bucket, because it's easier to carry a bucket to wherever dirty water needs to go, as opposed to carrying a big porcelain bowl.
Right.
That's full of water.
Prevent yet another kind of cleaning.
So now that bucket, and it's also very convenient, right? You've got your bowl that you're using for actual soapy water and then rinse water. And the bucket is just to hold the dirty water there. And so it's very convenient. It's right here. It's right next to you. And when you're all done, like wiping down and rinsing off all of your supplies, including the inside of the bowl that you use and the inside of the pitcher. Your drying cloth is probably pretty wet by this point, although everything else is clean and dry because you've dried it off. Then you need to take your bucket and go empty that water somewhere, usually the sink, but it could be out in the backyard, wherever is convenient for you and your child. And then they're going to wipe down the bucket, to make sure the bucket is nice and dry. And then you take that drying cloth and you're going to go take it to the hamper because, or go hang it up, somewhere.
Wherever
to
you're
be washed, right? Because that is probably not going to need to be washed. It's full of soapy water now. But wherever it goes, you take it and go put it where it goes. So it is a big deal to scrub a table. And I think that as adults, we generally just don't realize how many steps are involved.
Right, because
start to
we're
finish.
doing all these things, but in some kind of blended way. We're wetting the sponge at the sink and wringing it out, and then coming to the table and maybe spraying it.
Or I just grab the spray bottle of soap and I go to the table and I squirt. And I just take my drying cloth and I just wipe it down, right?
Yep.
And that's my procedure for like my super practical table scrubbing, use to get the table clean for us to eat at after we've had lunch or whatever. But that does not serve the same purpose as the works table scrubbing.
That's right. Because at the end of the day,
different work.
You are preparing the environment, but you're also teaching that process, right? That's what is it really takes it to the next level.
Yes.
And I'm glad you talked about you're thinking about these different steps that you follow. they should remind us of things like learning to read, learning to write. I mean, that is really what you're getting at, and why we would teach this to the young ones who are maybe not quite ready to learn to read, but they're pre-reading, or they're approaching that. You're teaching them order of operation. You're teaching them left to right. You're teaching them how to put little steps together to make a big thing happen. So making a sound we can put together words put together make sentence, meaning comes from there. And it's directly tied to the sorts of pre-activities you might be teaching them. So these are important. It's super important to help your kids learn to clean up. It's essentially a very essential Montessori. It's 100% aligned with the idea of self-care and care for the environment. And as we've said before, we really do teach that in Montessori. One of the principles is that we have a responsibility to care for our world and our neighbors. It's implicit to the Montessori approach. And we believe that most humans actually are drawn positively to that responsibility. We find it satisfying. I think that's why the research shows that when we do something like cleaning, it actually has a meditative-like effect. It's within our natural capacity for empathy that all of these systems work together. Now, of course, as adults, we can either choose to support or deter that development. So if we want, we can choose to stifle the child's development of this empathy and this good feeling they get. For example, we could take away their sense of control and the consequences they get. So, instead, what we want in order to grow it is we want to give children a place to be invested, and then let them experience the good and the bad consequence that comes as a result of that. And that's what feeds the empathy. So, instead, we want to feed it by inviting the children to participate fully in human life rather than stifling it. And cleaning is a big part of that human life. So, philosophically, it's really important. It's vital. It meets to it. More practically, it's fun. Kids love to scrub. It is meditative.
It tends to be a very giggly experience.
Exactly.
I know we're being all serious, like, yes, it's good for the parasympathetic nervous system, and there's all these procedures to scrubbing a table. But, in the end, if you see a child scrubbing, it's usually a very joyful experience, and
That's right.
Often with shouts of glee. Our children were sometimes you end up, just like calmly, quietly scrubbing something, but also it's also just as likely that you could end up with several children. And this is true with lower elementary kids too.
That's right.
There's no age limit on enjoying scrubbing. At our Montessori school, when I taught lower elementary, we had the children scrub the bathroom floor one time, and oh my gosh, those kids were just like, there were bubbles flying everywhere, and they were just loving. I mean, they were loving it. So
so this really gave them incredible joy.
Yes.
And so it sounds high. In some sense, it's highfalutin to say like you're meeting this kind of, you're feeding their empathy and you're helping guide them and all that sort of stuff. Because at the end of the day, what you might see if you do it right is just a lot of joy. But that's kind of the whole point, is like beneath that joy. That's why this is such a brilliant material and series of lessons, because beneath that joy is some real serious learning about self, environment, and order of operation, and so many other things.
Strengthening of fingers.
And everything else. So it's an awesome thing. So simple, cost almost nothing to do.
So go get some scrubbers.
Get a scrubber. Get them to your child. Invite them to clean with you.
Thank you all so much for joining us. I hope you enjoy this little section on scrubbers and learn something. If you have any questions for us or feedback or anything, you can reach us at hello@childoftheredwoods.com.
That's right. And if you like the show, and we hope you do, please consider giving us a thumbs up. If you leave a comment, we'll be happy to respond. You can email us, like Aubrey said. We really do love hearing from you and interacting. You can also just listen to this if you want to as a podcast. You can grab that on our website as well. If you go to childoftheredwoods.com/free, you can find links to our podcast and other great free resources.
All right. Well, we will be back next Tuesday at 1:00 p.m. Pacific with our next installment in the Montessori Essentials list.
This is a big one, guys.
It is. This time we are going to talk about the movable alphabet, which is going to be so fun.
It is. We hope to see you there.
All right. Take care, everyone.